Hello.
How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good, thank you. I'm looking forward for today. I was happy about your email. And you, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm a bit stressed, but that's normal. I'm a student, so but I'm also very excited for tonight. I never really met people that came inside of Luxembourg instead of going out, so it will be very interesting to see another point of view.
It's funny to see that way that people are trying to get out of Luxembourg according to you rather than than the
Yeah.
opposite.
Yeah, every student, not every student, but most students really go to either Belgium, France, the Netherlands, or Germany, or even Austria. So it is very uncommon for me to see people come in, but I think it is very interesting, especially because we have these huge institutions.
Exactly. Yeah, all the opportunity, all the careers opportunity that you might have in
Yeah.
Luxembourg are really interesting, especially in terms of EU law, of
Hmm.
course.
That is why I somehow got into THUAS and international and European law. Hello.
Hi, good evening.
Evening. I'm not sure I can. Now I can see the people joining.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We'll just wait till like 2 past 6 or until everyone is here. And then we can get started immediately. I'm gonna introduce myself once the other alumni is here. Oh, okay. So I'm already gonna introduce myself to you, to all of the alumni and the guest lecturer. So I'm Alize Egamon. I come from Luxembourg. I was raised in Luxembourg, which is why I am doing this edition. And yeah, I'm very excited for tonight, and I'm very excited to meet you all and actually talk to you. For the students still joining, the alumni present here is Brechman, if I'm saying the name right. I hope so.
Yeah, it's quite close. Good try.
How do I say it right?
Brechman
Okay,
was
Brechman.
very Dutch, but
It is okay. It's not one of the hardest I've heard. And then we also have Miss Ostromeka, if I say the name right.
Hey everyone, it's Ostrometska, but you can just call me
Yeah.
Susanna. I think that's easier.
Thank you. And then as a guest lecturer, we have Miss Placero.
Thank you. Yeah, good evening, everyone. And you pronounce the name correctly.
Okay, thank you. That one wasn't that hard for me as I do know French. And Mr. Laurent says hello to Susanna. I'm sorry. And yeah. If I think we should already get started just to start a conversation. And as a general question, I'm just gonna ask first of you all, what attracted you to Luxembourg? And anyone can start. Whoever has an idea just can go on, because I want this to really be a discussion and not like an interview.
I can go first maybe then if there's no other people. I know that Luxembourg may sound like an odd choice, especially because I'm Dutch and I do not speak French, which has made everything a bit more difficult over there. But I do think Luxembourg University has a lot of interesting programs, especially within law. And I think the most attractive thing is that the Court of Justice is in Luxembourg as well. So as I've also noticed during my classes, a lot of our teachers were actually working at the Court of Justice, either as lawyers or in the general court. And generally, we just had a very close relationship with the Court of Justice. So we got to meet advocate generals, we got to see court cases there. So I think that was definitely the most attractive thing. And a second nice thing is that Luxembourg University is rather cheap, especially compared to other universities, especially in the UK, but also other countries. So that was very attractive as well.
If I may continue and listening what Mr. Brechman just said, it's, for me, the fact that I'm French and that I speak French was something quite interesting for me to go in a country where I can speak my own language. I know that before going to Luxembourg, I worked a bit, so back then it was as an intern in Austria, where I needed to speak English, and I figured out that all my experiences were in English, and I thought that it could make sense to also have some kind of experience in my own language. And of course, because I specialized in EU law as soon as I could, with an Erasmus in Sweden, I specialized right away in European Union law, where I was constantly hearing about the Court of Justice of the European Union. And yeah, of course, also where it was in Luxembourg, I really wanted to go there. That was one of my dreams when I was a student. I really wanted to go to the Court of Justice. So this is how I started there first, so as an intern, and then I got a contract. So that was the idea. And since we're just between each other, I know how personal we can be, but I also had a boyfriend who was Luxembourgish. So even before when I was still in France and at the university, I was interested in going to Luxembourg.
Maybe if I may continue, I came here in a bit of a different capacity because I came here for work after my LLM, and I think Luxembourg is pretty special because even though it's very small and it's not very talked about, especially in the work and legal sphere when it comes to, for example, working in corporate law like me, but because of its size and because of Luxembourg city still being a capital, I think you get exposed very quickly and you have much more contact with companies, with clients, etc., other than you would have in big cities like London, for example, because there you have to really climb the corporate ladder before you get this kind of exposure. Whereas here you start and you're immediately thrown into a real work environment. And I think that's very interesting. But on the other hand, it's an interesting place to start. But yeah, it'd be interesting to hear what other people, how you came to work here as well. So.
I honestly, I have to agree with what you're saying as someone who lived in Luxembourg. It is very common to get into the market and then get to know everyone. And I think in Luxembourg, as in the companies I worked in, they have been very kind and always very welcoming. And this is where I want to ask the question to you guys. How international and how friendly do you think the companies or the university or the CGU was towards people coming from THUAS Law, but also from just the outside?
If I may start, I've only been in Luxembourg since October of last year. But the general feeling I get, and maybe it's starting to change a little bit, but Luxembourg is always looking for people, and there is also quite a big turnover, so people don't stay for a very long time. But because of that, you have this kind of environment of that's quite welcoming, and it's very easy to get adjusted to the lifestyle here. Where I work, it's extremely international. I work at Loyens & Loeff, which is originally a Dutch law firm, but you really have people from everywhere, and English and French are interchangeably the daily languages. And whereas already The Hague was very international, but this I think is a whole another level, especially considering the fact that you don't see many Luxembourgish people. So it's quite special whenever you meet one. For example, statistic-wise in my firm, out of 300 people, only 20 are Luxembourgish, and everybody else is from France, Germany, the United States. You really have people from all over, and it's an extremely international atmosphere. But I think it's also because you have so many people come and go all the time, and it's really in between France, Germany, and Belgium, and it's all intertwined. So I think it's a very interesting dynamic.
I have a similar experience actually, because in my class of maybe 25 people, we had 3 or 4 Luxembourgish people. And these obviously also came from parents that were Portuguese or French. So it's quite difficult to actually connect with Luxembourgish people in Luxembourg because they're very hard to come by. I feel like a lot of people from Luxembourg actually go to the Netherlands to study or to France. So they rarely stay there, which was also quite nice because our class was very international, which I did not expect that much because half of our courses were taught in French in the first year and some in the second year too. But yeah, people from all over the world came, and I think that's across the university, they're really trying to get people from abroad. And, you know, Luxembourg is an expat city, which is great, honestly. Very similar to The Hague, I think.
Yeah, we definitely agree with that. In Luxembourg, we could really meet people from all over the world. When it comes to the Court of Justice, of course, it was more European. but it was extremely. We had many different nationalities, and if I also think about the people I met outside of the court, they were indeed coming from all over the world. And while I was living there, I actually never met a Luxembourgish person. So I needed to go abroad to meet them, but I didn't meet any in Luxembourg.
Yeah, as information for every other student, Luxembourgish people are becoming a minority in Luxembourg because we don't have many 100% Luxembourgish people anymore. It is very hard to find them. You can only find them in the north because I don't know, they migrated over there somehow. And yeah, we have more people coming in every day, and it is very multicultural, and it is actually something that we appreciate in Luxembourg a lot. But Ms. Passero, I want to ask you, how did you come about and how did you get the internship and then also the job at the Court of Justice? Because it's very impressive that you, first of all, have a lot of experience in LLMs, but also outside of school. So how did you go about that?
Thank you for your question. Well, I first basically applied for an internship for the normal procedure, but I also sent messages, emails by looking at the extension of the email from the people working at the court. When I was doing my master, I was specialized in business law, so I ended up with people who did business schools, and the people for doing business schools told me about this technique of looking at the extension, because I never heard of that when I was in my law university just doing law, and I didn't know much about how to apply and all these kind of methods and techniques. So I remember that, this person from the business school told me this technique, and I sent several emails to judges or advocate general who had nationalities that I thought I have some kind of connection with them. So I'm French, so of course I contacted the French one. I studied in Sweden, so I thought I will contact the Swedish ones. I worked in Austria, I will contact the Austrian ones. And I studied and worked a bit in Romania, so I will contact the Romanian one. And it worked. I also wrote down, I remember in a motivation letter, the name of the director of my master back then, who was quite known and who knew people from the court. I ended up mentioning him also during when I had a call with the judge, and I guess that might have helped as well. And then from the internship to the contract, I have to say that I was really happy when I was informed that I could that I had the opportunity to change from being an intern to being a contract agent. I mean, of course, because it sounds really good. I was also going to be paid because it might have changed, but I was really good at finding internships where I could not be paid. So I did an internship at the UN, not paid. I did an internship at the Court of Justice, not paid. It was also good to find a way to get some money at some point, which was quite important. And I worked a lot. I mean, I think that most of us, when we're doing an internship, we put a lot of energy in it because it's our first experience, and it's if we are interested in the topic, we tend to give more than we think. And I guess I was entering in the office around 7 a.m. and leaving around 9 or 10 p.m. I was working a lot.
Mhm.
And I guess that was that was well seen by the people with who I worked, and they offered me this contract.
Wow, really working 15 hours a day is a lot. It's really impressive how much how much effort you put into that. I mean, I don't know many people that could do that for a long time. But I also want to ask the two alumni, how did THUAS Law impact your future plans? Did you actually know that you would at some point end up in Luxembourg for your LLM or for your work?
I definitely did not expect to end up there. I did expect to end up abroad because, as you may know, in the Netherlands, it's quite difficult to do a master's directly unless you do the year in between. So I was expecting to go abroad, but I actually applied for other universities as well. Also, the one good thing coming from THUAS is that if you would like, because the bachelor already has 240 credits, I believe, you can directly go into the second year of the master rather than the first. Whereas for people that don't have a master's yet, normally you have to go into the first year. I would still highly recommend taking 2 years because the first year is incredibly helpful if you want to continue your legal studies. Again, never expected it. Still, I think there was a very good flow from going from THUAS because we have such a European focused course. I believe we had a lot more knowledge than other people in my class who studied national law. So then you can really build upon the knowledge and make it even better rather than starting all over, so to say, in your first year of the master's. So very pleasant experience overall.
For me, I also didn't expect or plan to end up in Luxembourg at all. In fact, I was in London doing my LLM and looking to stay there. But as you go do a lot of networking events or job fairs, I found quite a few Luxembourg law firms that would approach us and invite us for an interview or recruitment event. And through that, essentially, I ended up receiving an offer to which I ended up accepting and moving here. But yeah, it was not something that I expected, but it's definitely not a decision that I regret either. And I think one big advantage of Luxembourg is that also after you finish the degree in The Hague, if you want to become a lawyer, you don't either you go and you restart in your national jurisdiction, or you can look for other options such as the UK or even Luxembourg. And that was a big selling point of a lot of the law firms, in that passing the Luxembourg bar, once you have an internationally accredited LLM, is not extremely difficult and is an option. So at the end, it made sense. But yeah, it was definitely not something that I planned on or foreseen.
I think it's very interesting that Luxembourgish companies approached you because I don't know how international Luxembourg is trying to be from the outside to get people in. I just know that they try to make students go everywhere and they accept everyone. So I think it's very interesting.
It's very popular, especially I know in London and in the United States. They go to a lot of law firms, and majority, in fact, of the people that I know and work with were recruited through LLMs in the UK and the States. So it's quite interesting, but it's extremely popular.
That's really good to hear. I like that. In the chat, Orla Harris, I hope I don't say your name somehow wrong, says, "Hi Verle. Did you manage to study in Luxembourg without a pre-master? I could not quite hear that.
Yeah, so I actually applied for the second year of the master. So how it's built up is that the first year is built from very similar classes as we had in The Hague. You have an option to apply for the second year, but the program director for my specific master 2 year, because I did space communication and media law, but there's, I believe, 5 other of them. He contacted me to ask me if I was sure about this, because he thought it would be beneficial to also do the first year. But on paper, you can apply for the second year, and if you're accepted, you're accepted. They will probably ask you to do the first year because it's beneficial to you, but I believe it's quite easy to get into the second year as well. So without a pre-masters in that case, yeah.
It is good to know that we do have the possibility to go back and not have to study for 2 years, but I think it's very positive that they gave you the option of choosing in between the two and not just making a decision on their own. I really like seeing that. I wanted to ask, how did you find the program in comparison to the THUAS Law program, but also did you like the program and what did it consist of more specifically? Because I think people are interested in your LLM.
Yeah, so the first year is really built up out of courses we've had before. So think about the EU labor law, fundamental rights, quite basic courses. But then what I think was very nice, even in the first year, even though we've had those courses before, is that even though we were in Luxembourg, they were a lot more critical of court decisions and of the EU approach. Not to say that they were EU skeptic, but more give us an opportunity to really think about why things were the way they are. So that was very nice. But the second year of the program, I believe is very interesting because I've never seen it anywhere else. It's really a combination of space law. So we learn about satellites, space communication, and communication law, quite similar. We studied all of the treaties from 50 years ago when radio communication just became very popular, which I don't believe you find in many other universities. I believe they have one in Leiden, which is also interesting. We also had courses on technology law, so think about data protection, internet law, also super interesting. And then the media law part is mostly fundamental rights and intellectual property. So this is also one of the reasons I was quite interested in this program, because it offers quite a wide array of courses rather than doing a 1-year master full of courses of IP law, which is what I'm interested in, and starting writing your thesis after 5 months into the year. So here, yeah, it was super interesting courses. I think there's a lot to find online about it too. Not to say that the other law masters aren't interesting, because if anyone is interested in EU law, they have very good courses to prepare you for a career within the EU as well. But yeah.
Thank you very much. For the other students to know, another LLM at the University of Luxembourg is European Economic and Financial Criminal Law. Then another one is European and International Tax Law, etc., etc. So there you do have a variety, not a huge one, but still you have a few choices. And on that, I also want to ask the typical questions about an university. How was the process of application? How are the exams over the year, and how are the teaching methods, etc.?
Yes, the application process was quite different from other universities. You have to send everything in paper form. I hope they have changed this because you have to create this big envelope with all of your documents. Good to have in mind is that on paper you need I believe, B2 in French. German is not required. And typically they just take a couple weeks to decide on whether you're accepted or not. Then in my case, it took a bit longer because I made the change in the M1 and M2. Sorry, what was the second part of your question? I forgot.
No worries at all. It was also about the teaching methods and the exams.
Yeah, so what I mentioned before, they really teach you to think critically about things, which is honestly great. The exams were only twice a year. So usually in February and once in June, where it's or January and June, just a month long of exams, which may sound very stressful, but this gives you a lot of time in between to study as well. And typically there's 6 modules across the year, where every module they teach a different class. But this is also changing quite frequently throughout the years, I think. So maybe next year this won't be the case. And this also means that you only get grades twice a year, which is quite different from the Hague University, where I think we're always a bit stressing about, oh, is the grade online yet? I don't know if this changed in the years that I was gone. But yeah, I remember after every exam, you're constantly checking. In Luxembourg, you know the day on which you're going to get your grades. It's twice a year, so you can relax for the other periods, which at first was something new, but eventually it's something I quite liked, actually.
Yeah, with the exam results, we're waiting right now for several exam results to come out. So I know which stress you're talking about. But I also want to ask Susanna and Miss Platereau, what did your work consist of in Luxembourg, or does it consist of course? Whoever wants to take the floor first.
I can start. Since it is the past, so let's start with the past and continue with what is happening right now, thanks to Susanna. Since I started as an intern and then I was a contract agent, the work changed a bit, in the sense that at the beginning as an intern, I guess they were testing me a bit as well, to see how I was working and what I could do, how much I could do. So I remember that I was participating in hearing. So I was looking at hearing, listening at hearing, and creating a report. This was this was every week. And what was really stressing was that I was getting all the new cases, or not all, but the ones that were allocated to my judge. I was getting, let's say, 15 or 20 cases, and I needed to do a summary of the facts. Or basically, I was following the IRAC method on creating, okay, what is the issue there? What is the fact pattern? What is the rule that could be used? And of course, I didn't have the conclusion then, because the decision was not taken yet. But I needed to always do those kind of summaries and give them to my judge. And every Monday, I remember, because I was always working on Sunday, because I needed to present them on Monday. We had this session with my judge and the other référendaire and administrateur juriste, where I needed to present those cases. So I was really stressed out, because of course it was in front of the judge. It was quite, I would say, quite symbolic in the bureau, in the office of the judge. and I needed to present them. So that was quite stressing, and that was every Monday. And then other than that, I was focusing on some tasks that that the judge was asking me on a specific issue, trying to find out case law, try to find some try to do some legal research. That was when I was an intern. And then when I was a contract agent, I needed to write rapport préalable. So this is basically what needs to be done before the judgments are published. So before the judgment is published on Curia, the référendaires, so the people working for the judge, are going to write down, well, the solution by conducting legal research, trying to find other case law that could help us to resolve the case. And then the judge would read at this rapport préalable and adjust it according to her or his opinion. And then it could be published on the website. So it was really legal. And in the sense, I am saying that because I know that when I worked in other places, I was combining legal tasks with tasks that were a bit more administrative or tasks that were a bit more diplomatic. But yeah, at the Court of Justice, it was 100% legal. And quite challenging and really different as well. So sometimes I would work on a case that would concern a migration issue. Another time would be about a consumer issue. Another time about an environmental issue with how to. We had a lot of issues on places where to put the trashes. Because apparently, of course, trashes are creating some issues in terms of environment, and depending on what you put in the trash, that might have an impact. So I remember we had a lot of cases on that, cases on tax law as well. So extremely different cases.
I think your internship sounds very interesting, especially regarding usually internships, they give the worst jobs to the students and just copying and copying and copying. So I think it's very interesting that they gave you so many cases. That is a lot, but yeah, otherwise I think it's very cool.
Yeah,
What about
good
you?
training to
Yeah.
speak up. And I was when you're not used to talk in front of people and that you're not used to talk in front of a judge, that was a bit challenging. That was great.
I can imagine talking in front of a judge must be quite different than talking in front of a teacher. What about you, Susanna? Sorry. What are you doing at your current job right now? And yeah, how do you think is the company?
Yeah, so my work is very different, but it's quite interesting because Luxembourg is very known as so-called a tax haven, but it's not what it is. It has a favorable tax regime. And because of that, you have some of the biggest transactions in the world being conducted either through or starting from Luxembourg. So when you work in a corporate department here, you do quite a lot of structuring work and financing work, which is quite interesting. You really see how acquisitions are financed, how big corporate restructurings are organized, and the cash flows. And if you're interested in corporate law from this angle, it's quite an interesting place to be, because whereas you wouldn't expect too much really happening in or out of Luxembourg, it's you still have all these big M&A deals that are going through or being conducted through here. So and even as a very junior lawyer like myself, you already get involved in it just because there are not so many people in Luxembourg. So at the end of the day, you end up being close to the clients from the start. So I participate in client calls. I draft a lot of documents from agreements to purely corporate resolutions. Other than that, you have a lot of, for example, migrations to and from Luxembourg, just because of its favorable laws. You have a lot of companies that wish to enter into other European jurisdictions. From outside will come in first to Luxembourg and then migrate from here. So you do a lot of quite to work with that as well. And yeah, it's a very interesting environment. I'm quite surprised every day just because I didn't expect myself to end up here or start my legal career here. But in the same time, it's a very good place to start and very good place to learn, because you get to do a lot of different kind of work, but in the same time, you learn every day, and you're still working with big law firms all around the world, with big clients all around the world. You learn to speak, you get client. I was quite surprised because from my second week here, I was already charged with my own client and had to take client calls by myself, which was extremely surprising because I was fresh out of an LLM, and despite having several internships before, just really starting and trying to understand the level of responsibility and grasp it. But if you like this kind of job, I think Luxembourg is great, just because I don't think you would get this kind of exposure in another big capital or big city. And I think that's also why I see quite a lot of people, for example, choose Luxembourg instead of Paris to qualify for the bar exams and start here in the law firms. Or instead of Brussels, I've known quite a lot of people who come here to start their practice and then move on after a few years of experience. I don't know if you have any specific questions or anything else you would like to know.
Well, first of all, I would like to say it is very interesting to hear that you said that for corporate interested students that they can go to Luxembourg. It is a great place to start off, because I've never heard of that before. I know that many companies come in, but I didn't think of students being accepted that much into those companies. So that is really great to hear. And I also want to ask, how helpful were the skills that you learned at THUAS in your current position?
I think, and this is what I've generally experienced in almost all of my internship, is that because our program is so practically oriented, and especially all of those assignments we do in the first and second year where we have to draft emails or make a schedule or do these tasks that you don't necessarily learn, or I don't hear for many other people to learn in universities when doing their legal studies. Quite quickly, I've had a lot of comments that I draft emails well, or I know how to draft a simple agreement, or I know what to look for in these agreements, because from the start, our minds are set to not only understand and know the law and all the theories around it, but also to practically be able to apply it. And I think that whereas as a lawyer, yes, of course, you should know all of the legal theories and understand the law and always think about why a law is a certain way. But in the same time, as you work in a law firm, you work for a client, and when you have your transactions, they also want things done and they want to have them done well. And so you have to be practically oriented, otherwise either you're gonna, you will, they don't want to waste their money on a legal theory. They want to see a practical piece of paper that's going to give effect to the transaction that they want to conduct. So I really did see all the practical skills as the biggest advantage, I think, of our program. Of course, a big advantage also the fact that we do comparative studies. So you learn a lot about different legal systems other than just one. So then it's easier to understand when you have multinational transactions, for example, what you need to, what the other side is doing, why they're doing it. You're able to organize yourself a little bit better and have a bit of a broader outlook than just from a one legal system. So in general, I think those are skills that are very unique, and you don't hear about a lot of other universities doing them. And that's what I always praise our university for. Just the practical approach that we have, that although is generally disregarded almost in the Netherlands, I think is one of the best things you can get from your studies.
That is great to hear. Does anyone have to add anything to that? If not, then I can ask the next question. Or do you have something to say, Ms. Placero?
Oh, I was just going to say that someone asked in the chat, Patricia asked in the chat about the language requirement, and I don't know if I'm also able to ask questions, but I believe that I also heard, at least I have friends that passed the bar in Luxembourg and that needed to have at least some basics in three languages. I don't know if I'm right with that, but I guess yes, Suzanne, I know much more than me.
Yes, so I can answer this. So the path is not an easy path. It's because nowhere in the world you have an easy path to pass the bar exam, but it's comparatively easier because as long as you have an LLM, you can qualify here for a CCDL, which is a cours complémentaire, which is essentially a complementary course in Luxembourgish law. That's the first step, and it lasts 6 months. After which you have a set of exams from the courses that you take in those 6 months, and then you have a training period of 2 years, which you have to complete in a law firm, or if you're already working like me, then just continue working for 2 years, after which you have another set of 2 exams, which one is in civil law and the other one is a specialization that you choose. So their whole process takes roughly 3 years. And in addition to all the legal courses, you need to, of course, know or at least have a familiarity with the 3 official languages in Luxembourg. Being French, you don't need to show any qualifications. However, because all of the courses are in French, you need to have a very high level of that. Then you have German and Luxembourgish, for which currently, from what I understand, where it stands is that you need to certify that you have taken at least 60 hours of German and 80 hours of German classes and 60 hours of Luxembourgish. But I know that there's talks to change it to have an entry exam, as before this was the case and it was changed, and now the government is again considering switching to the exam option. But yes, in general, you need to know at least French and be familiar also with German and Luxembourgish.
How did you, Ms. Brechman, experience the multilingual world of Luxembourg?
For me, it was quite difficult because as a Dutch person, we had quite a lot of French in high school, but it's, on paper we have B2, but in real life that's different because you don't really get to practice speaking and those kind of things. And also, of course, there's a big gap between high school and going for your master's. So I went there with zero French knowledge, basically, which was quite a big shock when the introduction day came because everything was told in French, and I was kind of looking around to see if anyone else did not understand what they were saying. My French has gotten a bit better, and they were quite lenient with exams that either you get the exam paper in English and the others in French, or you get the questions in French, but you're allowed to write down your answers in English. So I wouldn't say it was easy, and I would definitely not recommend going if you don't speak French because it does make it a lot more stressful. But everyone in Luxembourg, I think, speaks French or English. I mean, all of the teachers speak English. So, overall it was fine, but do not go if you don't speak French, please.
Yeah, I understand that. With the French, it is everywhere in Luxembourg. We always say that we have 3 languages that are there all the time, Luxembourgish, French, and German. However, French is really the main language next to Luxembourgish. So it is quite sad that we are kind of restricted with that, but we're working towards English. If no one has to add anything to that, and Miss Susanna just left us. I don't know if it was on intentional or not, but we'll see that if she comes back. So I'm just gonna ask both of you, how did you experience the Luxembourgish culture? Because I also want to talk a bit more about Luxembourg itself. Whoever wants to start.
You want to go first, or shall I go?
You can start, I will continue. You might have more things to say than me.
Yeah, I've only been there 2 years, but then in summers I was gone. So, practically I only lived in Luxembourg for 1.5 years, out of which the last 6 months were in lockdown. I think Luxembourgish culture is very difficult to explain, and I have not experienced that much of it, also because it's very difficult to meet Luxembourgish people. So for me, the culture was very multicultural. So it really depends on who you meet, which will most definitely be a lot of expats. Also, Luxembourg is quite small, so I think within a day you can have seen everything around Luxembourg City by foot. But not to say that it's not nice, especially in lockdown, it was very nice to have all the nature in Luxembourg City. I think within 5 or 10 minutes walking distance from anywhere, you can be in the middle of nowhere, so to say. So the nature is very nice. It's a very ancient city, so to say, but they're adding a lot of new buildings, especially around the Court of Justice in Kirchberg. It's completely different from where you can be 5 minutes towards the city center. But overall, very nice atmosphere, very, very quiet on Sundays, especially coming from the Netherlands where everything is open all weekend. So yeah, expect something very different, but very nice. Yeah.
If I may continue, I liked you answer when you said that the culture is really multicultural, because I think it summarizes perfectly what I also had in mind when thinking about Luxembourg. That's why I don't know what I could say about something extremely Luxembourgish. I feel like, yeah, even the people that are Luxembourgish, they have foreigners' parents. So, for instance, the only person I knew who was Luxembourgish, his parents were Italian. So then he was actually speaking Italian at home. So he definitely had an Italian culture. And I felt like the other ones were like me, so French or German or anyone from Europe brought kind of their own culture to the country. And when we're going to bars or restaurants, you could really feel that it was multicultural as well. So that was great. But then I don't know exactly what is a perfect Luxembourgish example, or what do we need to have in mind when we think about Luxembourg? I would not necessarily be able to answer that question, actually. I don't know about Susanna, if she can.
Sorry, I had to drop off for 1 second, but if you could just repeat what the question is, then maybe I can answer.
Yes.
No worries at all. Did you want to say something, Mr. Lorange? Or I think it was the other call, maybe. Either way, the question was about the culture of Luxembourg and how you experienced it, how you liked it, and how you perceived it.
I mean, from my perspective, unfortunately, I arrived here in October, where already things were slowly going into lockdown, and they've been in lockdown since about mid-November. but I think a Luxembourgish culture is very much an expat culture. So it's a work culture, but that you do things after work, whether you go to the center. It's a The only issue is that because you don't meet so many Luxembourgish people, you don't really know what their culture is, but you know what the culture of the city is. And the culture of the city is working during the week, and the weekends are for enjoying the restaurants. And I think it's a very culinary culture. There is a wine region, there is a lot of beautiful forests and walks, and I think it's a lot of that. But a very Luxembourgish thing I can think of only is wine, which is definitely a very nice product. But other than that, I'm not quite sure. I haven't even myself been to a
I
Luxembourgish
hope you can
restaurant
hear
yet.
me. So thank you very much for your speech, for your presentations, especially. Indeed, you have approached this topic with different angles, which is totally normal because you study as well different disciplines.
I think
What I
that
really
is the other
appreciate as
call.
well is that you use a lot of pathos as well, some of you, meaning that
Mr. Laurent?
you are very connected with your audience, so you are very close to them as well. So they can, let's say, share the same moments or the same, let's say, experiences on what you are talking about. And something that I can tell in the debates of the teams, in debate tournaments, they don't do enough. But when you are alone in front of an audience, of course, you
I
have to
sent
connect
him a
as
message.
well,
Maybe he'll
not
see it.
just on logic, ethics,
Did it
etc., but as well on pathos. And that is very good. And as well, what I like is that you of course, respect the time, and you really put a lot of modulation in your voice in order to impress the audience, and again, to connect with the audience. Again, a great organization, Mr. Motui. Very well done. It's extremely well organized, and yes, I was taking notes while I was listening.
I don't think we can
So
mute
tomorrow,
someone.
yeah, you will receive all the grades and
So
comments.
I
But
just tried as well.
congratulations for
I
the
hope
event,
it
of course.
will be possible.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to watch the second round. Yeah.
Either way.
Yeah.
So, moving on. I want to ask whether any of you had tried Luxembourgish food. If you already, I mean, the culture, you did summarize it very well because that is how everyone lives. Everyone is just on and about everything. And then on Sundays, nothing is going on at all. So, did you try any food like Bonenschlup or Gromperekischer?
I was going to ask if Luxembourgish food exists, but I
Yes, it does. We have
Okay. Bye-bye.
very normal food. If I
Good evening.
have
Bye-bye.
to, if I have to explain it in some type of words, it would be normal food that you see in Germany and France at the same time. It's kind of a mix of both. So yes, we do have food, but we don't have much of like a national dish that we eat every Sunday. But did any of you?
I didn't really try Luxembourgish food neither. It's true, wine. I did try the wine. I know that there are beers. I'm not a big fan of beer, but I believe that, I don't know if it's because of the influence from Germany or Belgium or the north of France, but I believe that for beer lover, that was also the place. And I thought about one thing about the culture, and I forgot to mention it, but the Grand Duke is quite known, and I remember now thinking about it that there were some pictures of him in the shops, and I remember that back then I was surprised to see to see the picture of the Grand Duke. So
I
that
didn't.
was.
I think it's very funny because for me it's normal to see his picture everywhere in every school. So
Yeah, I agree that sometimes it's quite confusing to see his face everywhere because sometimes it seems that it's in every shop window. And I don't know if you've visited his birthday once with the big fireworks show. but it was amazing to me to see this happen somewhere in June. For the Luxembourgish food, definitely never tried anything. I have no idea what it is. Beers, yeah, wine also, but no foods at all.
I think,
But there's
yeah,
definitely very nice restaurants in Luxembourg. Maybe not with Luxembourgish food, but in general, there's very nice restaurants.
Thank you very much for saying that. At least everyone knows now that Luxembourg is not just about Europe and working. So I also want to ask whether you lived through any perks of Luxembourg, any downsides that people would want to know before moving there, except for the language barrier, first of all, such as maybe about the living situation.
Perhaps I can start. I mean, the I guess big downside of Luxembourg that struck me in the beginning was the fact that it is an expensive place to be. So that's just as a note to everybody. But on the same time, I think the quality and standard of living is quite high. It's very easy to deal with all the administrative things. It's quite easy to find rooms in apartments. But if you compare it, for example, to The Hague, it's significantly more expensive. But it comes with the perks such as that it's safe, it's very well maintained. Most of the rooms and apartments are very nice. And I must say the language is not as much of a barrier as you would think. I mean, in restaurants and bars and shops, people generally, you can speak a little bit of French, but everyone generally speaks English. And for example, at my work, I work mostly in English, and you have international clients, so it's not an issue at all. And people are generally very nice and helpful, so it's a nice, pleasant place to live.
Miss Presso or Miss Brachmann, if you want to continue anything.
Yes, I was going to to continue about the fact that it's quite pricey. That's true. I remember that, and the other aspect I think was already mentioned by one of you. The fact that on Sunday it's a bit more quiet than in the Netherlands. That could be a surprise for some of you, for some of the students. It was not necessarily the case for me because in France I'm used to that. There is nothing you can do on Sunday, but it's true that I mean nothing. You can do things, of course, but let's say that if you compare with the Netherlands, where everything is open, where you don't necessarily really feel the difference between a Sunday and a Saturday in terms of shops and etc., there is a difference in Luxembourg. But the good part is that because it's a small city and there is this, I think it's the Grund, I don't remember. Yeah, right. In the middle of the city, there is this small forest and this possibility to go for runs and to go for a walk, etc., which is really appealing on a Sunday. But you need to adapt a bit then with a new rhythm.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, so definitely make sure you have food in the house before Sunday arrives because it can be quite a surprise.
It's not that bad. Shops are still open on Sunday.
Yeah, I think it got better during the time I was there, but when I just arrived, I was quite scared when I went out on Sunday because there was no one, and I couldn't find the first shop for quite a while.
Yeah, I think there is one supermarket next to the station.
The Monoprix is normally open.
Yeah, on Sunday as well. I remember that one.
Yeah, but by the way, so for everyone else, living costs is quite expensive. The good thing for students is that the university has a lot of housing available at very, very decent pricing. So I would say maybe even cheaper than it is in The Hague. So that's very nice. And they have a lot. You might live with, 20 other people, but better than paying you know, a lot for your rent. So that's one very nice thing if you want to study.
Are there any other problems you might have encountered, any one of you, when moving to Luxembourg, or living in Luxembourg, or even applying for a job or for an internship or for your program? Any kind of problems that you wouldn't have expected? If there is none, then I think I can just ask another question. So I also want to ask about, in comparison to the Netherlands, as in with the weather, but also with the food, and then also with the program, with the schools, and even with the people, what kind of difference did you have to adopt in that everyday aspect?
I can perhaps start with that one. I have something in mind for the one coming from the Netherlands that are used to take the bike. I don't know how it is possible in Luxembourg, but I would say that this is not the first thing coming to my mind when going to Luxembourg, since it's quite hilly, and then you will need to get used to take the bus, and therefore get used to a new rhythm. Even though there is quite some buses in order. So for instance, where I was living to go to the courts, I had quite some buses, but still, it's true that this was something to take into account, and that you are not as free as just taking your bicycle.
I would 100% agree, because I, as a Dutch person, took my bike to Luxembourg, where some of you may know I had to bike from Gara to Liepbertsberg, which was just uphill the way there. So the first day I arrived quite red in the face and very tired. So a lot less freedom, and also the last couple months that I was living there, the transportation became increasingly bad because of the tram construction, but I hope this has been finished by now. But
Yes, we have a tram now.
okay. Yeah,
It
so
changes
because
everything.
I was living around the Gare where they were building a lot, sometimes I couldn't even walk further. The buses were 20-minute walk away and this kind of stuff. But hopefully this is fixed and better, because normally the public transportation was actually quite good before this point.
No, now we have the tram, and I think a big thing to note is that the public transportation is free.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, a very big plus, because yeah, you can, and they go quite often. There's quite a lot of lines, and it's constantly expanding. But a big recommendation from my side, if someone's considering to come to Luxembourg, is to get a driver's license. I think that also saves a lot, and especially because it's such a place that you can explore so many other villages and things around. It's a very beneficial thing to do if you're thinking about Luxembourg. But other than that, I think just because it's so suited to people coming all the time, it's very easy to come. And in comparison to The Hague, I think it's a very simple transition. It's not that different because it's also size-wise perhaps similar to The Hague. It does feel a little bit bigger, but it's comparable. And that's it. Just learn a little bit of French, and it's similar.
Okay, I thought Miss Plassel might say something, but I am going to ask the students that are attending whether they have any questions now. They can just post them in the chat or ask the speakers directly. If not, I'm just gonna ask again the speakers, what would you say to the students of THUAS Law right now about their future with THUAS in mind and maybe going to Luxembourg? anyone wants to start?
I think it's a difficult question, especially because it's
Yeah.
been quite a while since I was studying in The Hague. Yeah, what I would say is find a good internship. It's very important. Right now, I'm working for the company again that I did an internship with during my bachelor. So try to find something that suits you, and there's quite a lot available as well. So that's something I would focus on. And also, I would highly recommend taking a year between your bachelor and your master, so you can maybe work for a bit of really find out what you find interesting, so that when you're ready for the master, you really know where your interests lie as well. So I would recommend that. It will cost you some extra time, but definitely worth it, I think, in the end.
I agree. And I would say do as many internships as you can and try as many different things as you want, because you may be interested in one field of law at one moment and then you'll try something else and that will stick. For example, I did my specialization in The Hague in criminal law, but now I'm working in corporate, and it's and I would never know until I did a number of internships in different fields to really see what fits, because once you start working, odds are you will stay in one field for a long time, but you need to enjoy what you do at the end. So you should be sure. And also, when you apply for work, I think it helps a lot when you are sure you know what you want to do, and it definitely helps a lot when you have quite some work experience. And also, work experience doesn't only mean doing complicated legal things, but experience just in the sense of getting used to work routine, how you organize your days, what to do when you make little mistakes, how to make phone calls. I think what helped me a lot is just doing a lot of internships.
I would definitely agree with that. Indeed, to try to do a lot of internships. Perhaps I was saying at the courts I wasn't paid. I hope they changed that. Perhaps now it's paid, because I mean, of course, it's also difficult, I think, for students to go from one internship to another if they do not get a salary with it. But it's true that if they do, that would be definitely an advice to try out different field of law and try the one that you actually prefer, because as Susanna just said, it's true that you might be specialized in something and then figure out that after an internship or two or three you realize that this was actually not at all what you were expecting. So that's a good advice. And then if we connect it to Luxembourg, I think that's perhaps it's not the first country people are thinking about when they're looking for an internship, but it's a place with great opportunities, as was mentioned. The fact that it's a bit smaller, I guess you feel like you're in contact with more people than if you were lost in a really big city with in Paris, for instance, where you might be perhaps focusing on smaller tasks. Then I believe, Susanna, you were saying that from the first week you had directly a client, and I am not sure this would be possible in another city.
Yes, exactly. I just think in Luxembourg, because of its size, the value of everyone's contribution is just different than in any other capital. And you have to remember that this is, in the end, also a capital city. Even though it's less than 1 million people in the whole country, it's still a capital and it functions like a capital.
And I don't know if it's the case for you as well, but I feel like you know so many people when you are there. So for instance, here in The Hague, I know much less people than when I was in Luxembourg, where it's so small and everyone is doing something related to law or finance, but everyone is doing more or less the same kind of job, I felt like, then you basically know everyone. It's really a special atmosphere, really great.
Yeah, everyone knows everybody. It's hard to feel lonely, but in the same time, yeah, it's very interesting. And yeah, exactly. Everyone has a similar mindset and doing similar kinds of work. But at the end of the day, it's hard. You get to, for example, know restaurant owners very quickly, or you get to, oh, you always have someone to meet when you're in the city or to do something. So that's, I think, a big advantage as well.
I mean, I do agree with everything that you're saying. In Luxembourg, people love talking. People just love meeting new people because we're so used to seeing the same faces every day. So we love talking to strangers and just getting to know you and getting to know where you're coming from, because it's interesting for people from the inside seeing people come in again. So this is really amazing from others to hear that, especially that the little aspect of knowing everyone. It is an aspect that I always say about Luxembourg because I was raised there, but even if people from the outside working in Luxembourg feel that, I think it's a really positive thing, especially during the nights or during the weekends where you can just go around town and meet people that you know already. But I also want to ask, as a bit of a final word, what kind of advice would you give to students from THUAS Law for their future, especially with applying for internships and applying for jobs?
Perhaps I can start with that, and regarding to internships, I would say to send a lot of motivation letters and a lot of CVs, in the sense that we tend to focus on only 1 or 2 job applications, or at least this is what I was doing at the really beginning, when I started to look for my internships back when I was a student. And it's true that we need to send a lot of applications and CV in order to get one. So I would say if students are focusing on Luxembourg, not to send only one CV to one specific person, but really try well, different people from the same company, but also different companies. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, and
I
also,
agree.
sorry.
Go for it.
Also, I would say prepare very well for your interviews, because you may not get a lot of them. So prepare yourself, and also definitely don't be discouraged if you don't get a job or an internship, because this happens to everyone, and it's going to happen a lot, which is fine, because eventually you'll definitely find something you like, because there are a lot of jobs, luckily, in this field.
And I agree with both. And one more that I will add, and I'm smiling at Mr. Larange here, but do a lot of networking. Just go to events, meet people, because networking is also a practice for your interviews. Every time you have to present yourself, every time you have to talk about yourself in a professional context, you practice for that interview. And also, the more connections you have, the easier it will be to land something. And speaking of rejections, at the end of the day, you only need one yes. So don't be discouraged by not getting every offer in the world. As long as you have one, and as long as you're happy with it, it will be okay. So, and stay open-minded.
That all sounds very positive. I'm very happy to hear that. It sounds like the world outside isn't that rough. So I'm not that scared anymore. Do you want to say anything, Mr. Laurent?
Yes, I wanted to add something as well, especially an advice when you live in an international city with a capital, which is a capital at the same time, like Luxembourg or Brussels, for example. Even if you have a possibility to meet so many expats who are in the city to work mainly, really do meeting the local persons, because I know in Brussels, especially a lot of expats don't make the efforts to talk with the locals who call the European institutions the communities still. But simply because otherwise you miss something. You stay in the city, and when you leave, you notice that you're not quiet. Is it true, this kind of thing, or not?
I mean, now not so much with COVID, but there's always a lot of cars in Luxembourg, and I'm quite surprised because indeed there's not so many people that live here, but a lot of people live just over the border because it's significantly less expensive and travel here every day because it's about 30 minutes to France and Germany. But there is a huge amount of cars, but because of that, they're really investing in the public transport.
Because I heard, for example, there are a lot of French people who go working in Luxembourg, but work as security guards or on some logistic as well, and they just go for the day and they come back. And indeed, when there were all these questions of closing the borders during the COVID, that was a bit, let's say, problematic for them. But another question, which is totally different. Have you already flown from the airport of Luxembourg? Because I heard that Luxembourg has a lot of destinations, even very, very far. And because once there was a judge who came to The Hague and took the plane from Luxembourg, and yeah, we never think that indeed there could be some big Boeings as well for Luxembourg. But have you flown already from the airport?
Yes, it's a very pleasant airport because I think it's one of the smallest airports I've ever seen and one of the nicest ones as well. But yeah, you currently not because of COVID and they've limited the flights, but usually I hear there's a lot of connections. But the interesting thing is that planes fly very low over Luxembourg city in itself. So you see a lot of big planes just above as you walk in the center. It's quite funny and scary sometimes, but yeah, you can fly everywhere from here.
Okay, that's great. And when you are in Luxembourg as well, you can travel to Trier, I think is not far, to visit a bit. I know that there is an academy as well for European law in Trier, but or to go to Saarbrück as well. So
Yeah, there's
yes,
a lot of places.
yeah, because it's part of Europe I don't know at all actually, but yes, very interesting, and as well to go to Arlon in Belgium, no, right? Because I come from Arles, that's why when I was in France, that's why I was always happy to see the name like this. But okay, so that's all I had as questions, and yeah. And as I said, another thing, such kind of event should have taken place in person, obviously. So it means that we could have organized it in a cafe in Luxembourg. So I mean, if next time, of course, if you are still in Luxembourg, and it could be nice to organize it indeed in person with Miss Manea, with Miss Germont, etc. Yeah, first because as well we had some connections with University of Luxembourg a long time ago. And it's good to visit as well the alumni and some employers as well, because some took students in internship in Luxembourg. Voilà, that's all I could say.
I have one last question towards Ms. Brechmann and Susanna. How did you experience the COVID situation right now and before in Luxembourg? Because, I mean, with travel, is still the idea of us. I'm in my second year. I know other students are in their second year and have to have internships in year 4 or want to apply for some all over the world just for them. So how do you think they could go about COVID, and how would you explain to them the situation of COVID in Luxembourg?
I think the situation here is quite good at the moment, at least in Luxembourg. Was opened until quite late, and you could still go to restaurants and shops for quite a long time. There wasn't really a full lockdown like in the Netherlands, for example. And And it's also very easy to get a test. Everyone gets an invitation in the mail for a test, or you can do a free test. So I think just because of its size, they were managing quite well. There was a period where they had a lot of cases, but at the end of the day, it's nothing compared to big countries. And in general, everyone is quite happy with the government's reaction here to COVID. So it's quite it's relatively normal. For example, me, I still work from the office every day, which I think it's quite special compared to other places in the world, and that kind of exemplifies the situation here, I think.
Yeah, so I had
Absolutely.
a quite different experience because I was there from, let's say, beginning of COVID, March until July. And I believe in the beginning there was quite a big spike also because the population is so low that percentage-wise it seemed like we had a lot of infections. So we were in lockdown from April until end of May. So 2 months of nothing. It wasn't as strict as in France, I would say. You didn't need a paper to go outside, but there was police everywhere. Luckily, we got free masks from the government quite quickly. And for me, it was quite difficult to leave the country and cross borders to come back here. So we needed a lot of paperwork to cross borders to leave eventually. But yeah, I think after the first wave, it went a lot differently. And I think here in the Netherlands, we got into the hard lockdown now. So yeah, I had a different experience, but I think as long as you can show them the papers that, you know, you have to be in Luxembourg for some reason, you will be fine. And the testing went very well after a month already, which I've heard was not the case here in the Netherlands. So I think they're dealing with it quite well.
Well, thank you very much for all of your attendance and just answers in general, and thank you very much. Does anyone else have a question?
Yes, have you met Xavier Bettel once?
I
No?
did.
You did?
Yeah.
So
He went.
Yes, tell me.
He came to our high school when we had elections going on, and so of course he came by to like talk to students.
And because I remember that Boris Johnson had a terrible experience when he came last time in Luxembourg, because Xavier Bettel made a speech. Actually, next to him there was no Boris Johnson, I think, and he made a speech addressing him still or something like that. So because there was a lot of criticism about the Brexit. But yeah, apparently he's quite a fun person, from what I understood. So yeah, So if you meet him, yeah. And is he approachable like Mark Rutte, like he's on his bike, or he has bodyguards and all? No.
Well, usually just in the city center, you can just find him with his husband just walking around on a Sunday. That's very normal to just see them. But usually, if it is for some kind of meeting, of course, he's gonna come with maybe one bodyguard or with his team. But otherwise, it's very nice to meet him. It's always a pleasant experience to have him somewhere. But his eyes are very blue.
Ah, okay. I didn't
Yeah.
know. Very blue. Okay. No, but yeah, no, but it's really something which is typical to some countries where, some head of states, because he's a head of states, are very, very approachable. So yeah, okay.
If there are no other questions, I would like to thank Ms. Ostromet. No, I'm gonna just say Susanna, Ms. Placero, and Verle. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation and coming here.
Thank you very much, Elise, for the invitation. It was really a pleasure to meet all of you and talk about Luxembourg and think back about good memories. And that was a great experience. Thank you very much.
Same. Thank you very much. It was very nice.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Pleasure
Thank you,
to meet
everybody.
you all. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye
Bye bye.
Thank you.